Morning, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm just getting organized here. There, I think I have my YouTube up, and if you are on YouTube, you can say hello. Um, I am just getting my screen up. So, Art, we can certainly promote your Arizona event when it gets nearer. Um, Probably a month out is a good time. Um, and I'm just going to make my screen a little bit smaller so I can see the YouTube also. And okay, so last week we were in the midst of this kind of debate between Jung and his soul. And we didn't get very far. In fact, I don't think we actually even started because we were looking at some other things. And one of those was Colleen Kibert's um, interview, which I hope all of you will see. Um, and that can be found on the homepage of this YouTube channel. Good morning, State of Awakening. We're all awake and here. So, he's having this uh, debate with his soul, and I'm going to go back a couple of short paragraphs so you see what it is. But it's in essence, it's love, and so I will go back two paragraphs. I'm on page 502 of the Reader's Edition. Let me just see if I might have made a note of where this is in the electronic version. That would be very nice if I did. Um, okay. And I don't seem to have done. But I'm going to go get the electronic version so that you can see the words as I'm reading them. That's probably more uh, better for everyone. And so just a moment while I get that. And okay, I've got it. And I'm going to try to just do a little artillery trick here and try to get where we are. So we are around footnote 68. And let's see if I can, does anybody see 68? Hmm. Yeah, I just have to look in this until I see a footnote. Um, Sorry, it's going to take a moment while I go through this. And I don't want to show it to you because it'll make you seasick if you watch it while I'm moving this. Um, there's got to be a footnote here I can pick out with my eyes. There's 65. Ray. Uh, there's 66. Channel, if you see, let's see. Okay. All right. So um, the soul has broken into tears because Jung wants what is his back. And so he says to her, I will not be unjust, I replied, but give me what belongs to me and beg for what you need from it. What is it? Speak. Alas, that I can neither keep it nor conceal it. It is love, warm human love, blood, warm red blood, the only source of life, the unification of everything separated and longed for. And so I am at the beginning. This paragraph is the beginning of the last full paragraph on page 502 of the Red Book Reader's Edition, in case you want to look it up in your hardbound copy. And so here's how it goes. So I said, it is love that you claim as a natural right and property, although you still ought to beg for it. You get drunk on the blood of man and let him starve. Love belongs to me. I want to love, not you through me. You'll crawl and beg for it like a dog. You'll raise your hands and fawn like hungry hounds. I possess the key. I will be more I will be a more just administrator than you, godless gods. You will gather around the source of blood, the sweet miracle, and you will come bearing gifts so that you may receive what you need. I protect the holy source so that no god can seize it for himself. The gods know no measure and no mercy. They get drunk on the most precious of draughts. Ambrosia and nectar are the flesh and blood of men, truly a noble meal. They waste the drink in drunkenness. The goods of the poor, since they have neither God nor soul, presiding over them as their judges, presumptuousness and excessiveness, severity and callousness. Are you Severity and callousness are your essence. Greed for the sake of greed, power for the sake of power, pleasure for the sake of pleasure, immoderation and insatiableness. This is how one recognizes you, you demons. Yes, you haven't yet to learn, you devils and gods, you demons and souls, to crawl in the dust for the sake of love, so that from somewhere, you snatch a drop of the living sweetness. Learn humility and pride from men for the sake of love. You gods, you firstborn son, your firstborn son is man. He bore a terribly beautiful, ugly son of God, who is renewal to you all. But this mystery too fulfills you. You bore a son. You bore a son of men who is my renewal, no less splendid, terrible, and his rule also will serve you. Then Philemon approached me. He raised his hand and spoke. Now, before I read that, let me just read where we are in footnotes. Footnote 68, in Greek mythology, ambrosia and nectar are the food and drink of the gods. And footnote 69, this sentence does not exist in the Black Book. And the date of this apparently is January 14th, 1916. So this is 2 years after 80% of this book was written that he is writing this. That's in footnote 70. And so I will go on. So what doesn't appear in the Black Books is then Philemon approached me, raised his hand, and spoke. So Jung is envisioning this two years after the main part of the Red Book. Both God and man are disappointed victims of deception. Blessedly blessed, powerlessly powerful, the eternally rich universe unfolds again in the earthly heaven and the heaven of the gods, in the underworlds and in the worlds above. Separation once more comes to the agonizingly united and yoked. Endless multiplicity takes the place of what has been forced together, since only diversity is wealth, blood, and harvest. A night and a day passed, and when night came again, I looked around, and I saw that my soul hesitated and waited. So I addressed her. Okay, so this is the footnote 70, which is January 14th, 1916, that this is happening. I'm getting a bunch of stuff here. Okay. What? You're still here? Didn't you find the way, or didn't you find the words which belong to me? How do you honor mankind, you earthly soul? Recall that I bore and suffered for you, how I wasted myself, how I lay before you and writhed, how I gave my blood to you. I have an obligation to lay on you. Learn to honor humankind, for I saw the land that is promised to man, the land where milk and honey flows. Okay, so that's footnote 71. That's no doubt a biblical reference. Yes, indeed. It is in Exodus 3. God appears to Moses in the burning bush and promises to lead his people out of Egypt into a land flowing with milk and honey. Okay, that's in Exodus. Going on. I saw the land of the promised love. I saw the splendor of the sun on that land. I saw the green forest, the golden vineyards, and the villages of man. I saw the towering mountains with hanging fields of eternal snow. I saw the fruitfulness and fortune of the earth. None, but I saw the fortune of man. You, my soul, force mortal men to labor and suffer for your salvation. I demand that you do this for the earthly fortune of humankind. Pay heed. I speak in both my name and the name of mankind, since our power and glory are yours. Thine is the kingdom of our promised land. So bring it about, employing your abundance. I will remain silent. Yes, I will leave you be. It depends on you. You can bring about what man is denied to create. I stand waiting. Torment yourself so that you come to find it. Where is your own salvation if you fail in your duty to bring about that of man? Pay heed. You will be working for me, and I will remain silent. Now then, she said, I want to set to work, but you must build the furnace, throw the old, the broken, the worn out, the unused, and the ruined into the melting pot, so that it will be renewed for fresh use. And I have Amela arriving. Good morning, Amela. Now,
Good morning.
hi. Did you have a comment, Amela?
Just good morning. I just logged in.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome. I want everybody to consider listening to a most beautiful song that I heard this week. It's called One Voice, and it is uh, just a minute. I'm gonna stop for a minute because this um, sounds like the same sort of ideas. And I'll just share the link and just hear out the same ideas that I'm talking about here. And that they are I'll give you the link. It's a song called One Voice. It'll take you 3.5 minutes to listen to it. Um, And there's another version of it that is done by the Air Force Band that's even better. But I was just enchanted by the voices of these three members of the Navy band uh, who sang it. And so anyway, that's just an aside and something that I hope you'll have a chance to look at. Okay, now going back to sharing screen. And I'm put in mind of that song, One Voice, um, because of what's being said here. And so Jung is saying to his soul, you will be working for me and I will remain silent. Okay, so Jung is sort of signing off on his conversation with his soul and telling her, get to work. And and then she says, now then, she said, I want to set to work, but you must build the furnace, throw the old, the broken, the worn out, the unused, and the ruined into the melting pot, so that it will be renewed for fresh use. And there's a line in that song which is, leave the rest behind, it will turn to dust. And that this passage here reminded me of that. So I'll read it again. Now then, she said, I want to set to work, but you must build the furnace, throw the old, the broken, the worn out, the unused, and the ruined into the melting pot, so that it will be renewed for fresh use. It is the custom of the ancients, the tradition of the ancestors, observed since days of old. It is to be adapted for new use. It is practice and incubation in a smelter, a taking back into the interior, into the hot accumulation where rust and brokenness are taken away through the heat of the fire. It is a holy ceremony. Help me so that my work may succeed. Touch the earth, press your hand into matter, shape it with care. The power of matter is great. Did hap not come from matter? If is matter not the filling of emptiness? By forming matter, I shape your salvation. If you do not if you do not doubt the power of hap, how can you doubt the power of its mother, matter? Matter is stronger than hap, since hap is the son of the earth. The hardest matter is the best. You should form the most durable matter. This strengthens thought. And then it comes to number 6. Um, I did as my soul advised and formed in matter the thoughts that she gave me. She spoke often and at length to me about the wisdom that lies behind us. Not one night but one night she suddenly came to me with a sense of unease and anxiety and exclaimed, "What am I seeing? What does the future harbor? Blazing fire. A fire hovers in the air. It draws near. A flame, many flames, a searing miracle. How many lights burn? My beloved, it is the mercy of the eternal fire. The breath of fire descends on you." Okay. But I cried out in horror. I fear something terrible and dreadful. I am keeping afraid, since the things that you announced beforehand were awful. Must everything be broken, burned, and destroyed? Patience, she said, and stared into the distance. Fire surrounds you, an immeasurable sea of embers. Don't torture me. What dreadful mysteries do you possess? Speak, I implore you. Or are you lying again? Damned, tormenting spirit, deceiving fiend, what are your treacherous specters supposed to mean? But she answered calmly, I also want your fear. What for? To torment me? But she continued, to bring it before the ruler of this world. He demands the sacrifice of your fear. He appreciates your sacrifice. He has mercy upon you. Jordan has arrived. So I'm going to refer to footnote number 75, which is in the Black Books number 5 and has Abraxas. So Abraxas arrives at this point. That's what is coming. He has mercy upon you. He is Abraxas in this case. Okay, so Jordan, we are on page 406 of the hardbound copy, and we're moving along. Okay, so Abraxas has mercy upon you. Footnote 75. Mercy upon me? What is that supposed to mean? I want to hide myself from him. My face shrinks from the ruler of this world, for it is branded. It bears a mark. It beheld the forbidden. Therefore, I avoid the ruler of this world. But you should come before him, she said. He has heard about your fear. You instilled this fear in me. Why did you give me away? You have been summoned to serve him. But I moaned and exclaimed, thrice damned fate, why can't you leave me in seclusion? Why has he chosen me for sacrifice? Thousands would gladly throw themselves before him. Why must it be me? I cannot, I don't want to. But the soul said, you possess the word that should not be allowed to remain concealed. What is my word? I asked. It is the stammering of a minor. It is my poverty and my incapacity, my inability to do otherwise. And you want to drag this before the ruler of the world? Move this up a little. But she looked straight into the distance and said, I see the surface of the earth, and smoke sweeps over it. A sea of fire rolls close in from the north. It is setting the towns and villages on fire, plunging over the mountains, breaking through the valleys, burning the forests. People are going mad. You go before the fire in a burning robe with singed hair, a crazy look in your eyes, a parched tongue, a hoarse and foul-sounding voice. You forge ahead. You announce what approaches. You scale the mountains. You go into every valley and stammer words of fright and proclaim the fire's agony. You bear the mark of the fire, and men are horrified at you. They do not see the fire. They do not believe your words, but they see your mark and unknowingly suspect you to be the messenger of the burning agony. What fire? They ask. What fire? You stutter, you stammer. What do you know about a fire? I looked at the embers. I saw the blazing flames. May God save us. My soul, I cried in despair, speak, explain. What should I proclaim? The fire? Which fire? Look up, see the flames that blaze over your head. Look up, the sky is reddened. With these words, my soul vanished. But I remained anxious and confused for many days, and my soul remained silent and was not to be seen. But one night, a dark crowd knocked at my door, and I trembled with fear. Then my soul appeared and said in haste, "They're here, and will tear open your door, so that the wicked herd can break into my garden. Should I be plundered and thrown out onto the street? You make me into an ape, a child's plaything. When, oh my God, shall I be saved from this hell of fools? But I want to hack to pieces your cursed webs. Go to hell, you fools. What do you want with me?" But she interrupted me and said, "What are you talking about? Let the Dark One speak." I retorted, "How can I trust you? You work for yourself, not for me. What good are you if you can't even protect me from the devil's confusion?" "Be quiet," she replied, "or else you'll disturb the work." And as she spoke these words, behold, Philemon came up to me, dressed in the white robe of a priest, and lay his hand on my shoulder. Then I said to the dark ones, "So speak, you dead." And immediately they cried in many voices, "We have come back from Jerusalem, where we did not find what we sought. We implore you to let us in. You have what we desire, not your blood, but your light. That is it." Okay, so we have come to the beginning of the seven sermons of the dead at this point. And so this is taking place over about a 2-week period. And on January, footnote 77 says the preceding sentence does not occur in Black Book 5. And footnote 78, on the significance of the sermons that follow, Jung said to Agnella Jaffe, that was his secretary who wrote or was the secretary for Memory Streams Reflections, that the discussions with the dead formed the prelude to what he would subsequently communicate to the world, and that their content anticipated his later books. From that time on, the dead have become ever more distinct for me as the voices of the unanswered. As the voices of the unanswered, unreserved, and unredeemed. The questions he was required to answer did not come from the world around him, but from the dead. One element that astonishes him was the fact that the dead appeared to know no more than they did when they died. One would have assumed that they had attained greater knowledge since death. This explained the tendency of the dead to encroach upon life, and why, in China, important family events have to be reported to the ancestors. He felt that the dead were waiting for the answers of the living. And that was in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, pages 258 and 259. So you want to comment, Jordan, before we start the first sermon?
It's just interesting that in that sense, the learning or the experiencing stops at the death.
Right.
And it's just curious to me. And it's actually what it's reminding me of is if I play the Nietzsche God is dead piece and then say God was created in the image of humans, Jung has a comment at one point, I'm not sure in which work, that says the reason for evil in the world is people not able to tell their stories, meaning there is no evil. Evil is the result of intense long-term oppression. And it's not not a God outside, not an evil outside, where then the evil comes from within, and like a poisonous garden originates from basically people being squelched. And so
Right on.
here, I think that that kind of aligns with the, well, then evil or learning or divinity experience is stopping when they die. Meaning it's stopping because, well, it was part of the living rather than an outside divine or evil force. It was something that came from humanity as a thought. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just curious to me.
No, I agree with you. So Richard says deceitful demons of one's own essence aren't much different than the blue-blooded true demons in hell. And I think, Richard, you'll find as you study Jung that the blue-blooded true demons in hell are actually in your psyche as well. And they're your own essence as well. And Cherie
I think
says,
too, with
go
Richard's
ahead.
comment there, I think with Richard's comment too, it's another reason, just because of fear, people will choose a familiar hell
Yes,
because, in a sense, it's control. It's yes, it's self-sabotage, and yes, it's unproductive, but they know the outcome's going to suck. So, but the thing is, they know the outcome. Whereas if you see an unfamiliar heaven, you get startled and terrified, and it may be beautiful, but I don't know anything about it. So, the amygdala or the fear instinctively says turn away. Instead, if you turn to look past your expectations and actually see something new, there's joy that can enter there. And like you said, then those demons, they reside within.
right. And there's a couple of more points. There's a footnote here, footnote number 75, that the dead were Anabaptists led by Ezekiel were heading to Jerusalem to pray at the holy places. Now, many people have gone to the Holy Land and not found what they sought. Okay. And the reason they haven't found what they sought is that what they sought isn't there. It's
Right.
here.
Yeah.
It's here. And so people were looking outside for and communications to the Almighty God in heaven, which was outside in their view.
Right.
And yet that wasn't what was being discussed. And I don't know if the church fathers knew that, okay, or at what
Mhm.
point they came to know that it was inside, okay,
Right.
because there's no place where we can point to that admits that
Yeah.
everything we're talking about is in the psyche. And
That's an interesting point too, because I'm in agreement. And at the same time, I think they found it earlier than they knew. Gospel of St. Thomas or Gospel of Thomas and Gnosis. And then they cut it out. Well, I think when they cut it out, like you said, well, they didn't know because only few people knew about the Thomas and Gospel
right,
and then cut it out, so no one knew about the inner
Right.
world. They basically took that out.
And they lost it. They basically
Yeah.
lost it in the dark ages.
Right.
And so they kept talking about something that wasn't
Didn't.
correct and
Right.
didn't know anything about. And right up to the point where the Pope is indicting Galileo for taking the position that the Earth orbits the sun instead of the sun orbiting, or I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
church took
Yeah.
the position that the sun orbits the earth, but Galileo said, nah, no, the earth orbits the sun.
Well, yeah, and it's funny, even that shows up in some astrology scuffles where it's
Mhm.
heliocentric, sun orbiting Earth versus geocentric, meaning, the Earth orbits this. I mean, so that's interesting there. And it's funny when you said they go on and on about yeah, they go on and on talking about things they don't know about. It reminds me of the short story of Grandma's Roast.
Right.
The grandson comes in and says, "Grandma, I know you have many, many more years, but I want to do the roast this year because I want to continue the tradition. So can I? Can I?" And she's like, "Sure. I don't really want to do it anymore anyway. So yeah, let's get you taught." So he goes in and he takes the roast and he cuts both ends off and he marinates it and seasons it and all of this. And you know this story.
Yeah.
And he cooks it and takes it in, and she takes a knife and fork and she takes a bite and she said, "I think this is the best roast I've ever tasted.
Hmm.
But why did you waste a pound of meat and cut the ends off?" Well, Grandma, you always cut the ends off. And she said, "Oh my." She goes, "That's because it's a habit. My oven was too small back then."
Yeah, right.
So, and so that reminds me of my definition of tradition now is tradition is just peer pressure from dead people. So you better know what they were really doing because otherwise you're going to be doing things that are meaningless.
Yeah. And Jamie says, I believe Edinger relates geocentric theory to ego inflation. Um, well, yeah, obviously, if you go to the Vatican, you'll definitely see ego inflation par excellence.
Yeah, that's a good point that everything revolves around you, kind of thing. That's everything
Yeah,
revolves around the earth. And the
right,
reality is you're on for a ride and nothing really revolves around you. You got
right,
to kind of get in orbit and get your button gear.
right. And in terms of the return of the dead, I just want to share my personal experience because um, I have found myself in my dotage. I'm now 77 years old, so I'm not a spring chicken anymore. But I've found myself having to go back in my psyche and rehabilitate my grandfathers, both of them,
Mm-hmm.
because my maternal grandfather, when I was young, when I was in my adolescence and early life, and for most of my life, I considered him the most bigoted person I ever knew. And yes, he was a bigoted man. There's no doubt about that. Um, but uh, and he was born this at the same time as Jung in the same year. Um, and so in the late 19th century,
Right.
uh, and he was, believe it or not, he was too old to serve in World War One. And the fire and flames that they're talking about, that Jung's talking about in this passage, are obviously World War One going on at this
Mm-hmm.
point, because he's a year and a half into World War One at this point. Although Switzerland was neutral, he had to serve, and he had to serve in the Swiss Army, and somehow they managed to make it so that the Swiss Army would man the prisoner of war camp. And so he was the chief surgeon in the prisoner of war camp for several months during his service in the Swiss Army. Um, and um, and so anyway, I look upon my grandfather's life and, what he was. So I rehabilitated him by understanding that he was a stable influence in the country, um, at a time that there was a war going on, two wars,
Mhm.
okay, because he was too old for both world wars.
Right.
And my paternal grandfather was too young for World War One and too old for World War Two. So that's my luck, but my grandfather created a stable environment for my mother to be raised in. And
Hmm.
and he was quite old when she was born. He was 47 when my mother was born, and her first memory of him was only that he was old, because he used to take her
Right.
to kindergarten every day. So he was probably 52 at that point. But all the other kindergarten children had parents that were in their 20s. And so she was
Right.
comparing her father to those parents and saying, wow, my father's old. Well, he got back at her because he lived until she was 50. He
Yeah.
lived to be 97, and actually his psyche checked out long before that. Um, so he probably doesn't even know he's dead. But right.
Right.
But um, but he was a stable person who worked for 50 years on the Pennsylvania Railroad. And he retired in 1954. And he was, one of the people who was creating the United States at a time when we were in global war.
Hmm.
And I think what we have to remember is that we are all creators and that we are creating the world in which we wish to live and in which we wish our children to live. That's what we're doing. And that's why creativity, as um, Colleen Kubert talks about it, is so important for all of us to understand that we are all creators. We are the creators, okay? And when Jung talks about um, needing our blood, okay, my grandfather needs my blood, my living blood, in order for me to rehabilitate his role in my lineage, okay? And um, my paternal grandfather was an alcoholic. Um, he was a traveling salesman at the end of his life, which is when I mostly knew him. He had been a very successful entrepreneur in the 1920s when he was in his 20s and started one of the first correspondence schools. But he lost the school that he started in the crash of 1929 when he was 29. And then he had to make it through the Depression. And to his credit, at the end of the 30s, he recognized that there was war coming and he was worried about his eldest son, who's my father. And he started to ask around about how my father could get into the Naval Academy. And he went to his congressman, and the congressman said, well, these are the appointments I have are political, so he has to go in through the fleet. And about half of the brigade of midshipmen, which is right here next to me, 2 miles from me, half of them are political appointees by congressmen and senators. Each one in Congress and Senate gets 4 And so they can have 4 kids at the Naval Academy at any given time. So that means 1 per year. Um, and and so the other way to get into the Naval Academy is either to join the Navy and do extremely well, or get in through and therefore get picked up as a seaman or uh, a petty officer and sent to the Naval Academy. Or the other way is to go through Naval Academy Prep School, which is in Newport, Rhode Island. And there's still another way, and that is you can be brought in by the Alumni Foundation. The Alumni Foundation has 80 appointments, and they give you a scholarship for 1 year to go to a civilian college and prove your grades. And my father got one of those scholarships apparently because he went to the University of Pennsylvania for a year before he went to the Naval Academy. So even though he only went to the Naval Academy for 3 years because of wartime, he actually did have 4 years of college education because he had gone to Penn for his freshman year. And so my grandfather, who was like Willie Loman, the death of a salesman, a very sad individual at the end of his life, an alcoholic. But to his great credit, and this is me rehabilitating him now in the context of what we're talking about, I'm giving him my blood to understand him better and how tough his life was and how much effort he put into getting my father into the Naval Academy, which makes it possible for me to be here today because my father spent the entirety of World War II in the Naval Academy.
Yeah. You make actually a really excellent, I think, healing tool example for people there, because I don't in any way want to minimize any kind of torment or abuse anyone's parents or grandparents or uncles or aunts or people put on anyone. But what you're doing in a big picture is you're very actionably not playing the victim, and you're going back to realize the wonderful blessing of while you were growing up, you were watching your parents and grandparents still growing up, figuring it out. And so you give them their humanity back when you bring back the dead like that, and you can learn from what they did well. And what happens then is, one, you don't have you don't have hate, and hate has a lot of energy in it. And
Sure.
it wastes, and it also poisons, and it's like hate. Hate, I think, what is it? Hate or resentment is like drinking poison, hoping your enemy will die. And
right.
and that's dumb. Is that that's obviously not common sense. But I think with you rehabilitating your grandfathers, that's a lesson for people out there to look back at the people they were, not the ills they did to people, where they were figuring it out.
Sure.
And in that, you can learn from almost anything. But also, I think it calms your own psyche from blame, 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 which is outside. Then you stop playing the victim. 1, 2, 3, you can live your life into being your way, and instead of taking responsibility for all these things that aren't yours from way back.
Right.
Because I think there's an avoidance with all that. And you're really giving people, I think, a lesson there. Rehabilitate your lineage. Pick one.
Right. Yeah, and you can pick anything. I mean, my maternal grandfather lived with us for 8 years when I was growing up, until I was in the 10th grade. And he and I were like oil and water. And it's because of him, and I thank him for this, that I'm not not a MAGA guy, okay?
Yeah.
Because I just became the opposite of him, and I thought he was the most bigoted person I ever knew. And I still think that, okay, in terms of what his attitude toward life was. But, in fairness, one of the big secrets in my family was that I was born 5 months after my parents married, which I didn't officially know until I was 50 years old. When I was 50 years old, my parents had a wedding anniversary party, a 50th wedding anniversary party, and I was there.
Yeah.
And they were admitting when they got married.
Right.
But there was an incident when I was 12 years old that was very telling. What they had told me was that they had gotten married on my father's birthday, which was December 2nd, 1945, which is, more or less 10 months before I was born, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and so, and I don't think I was conceived that particular day, but they had told me they had gotten married on his birthday. And so when I was 12 years old, we picked my father up at the station one day, and I said, "Well, happy birthday, Dad, and happy anniversary to both of you." My father whips around to me like he's angry with me, and he says, "Don't mention our marriage to your grandfather. It wasn't a very happy time for him."
Uh,
And I said, "What did I do?"
right. As a kid, you have no idea.
Yeah, and but now I look back, and my mother was the youngest of three girls, and her oldest sister had married a sailor at some point during the war. And I don't know exactly too much about his her life, and I haven't seen my cousin that was the product of that marriage since my 20s. I have no idea where he is today. Um, but um, but that was a really unhappy time for my grandfather after his eldest daughter had married the sailor, and um, then his youngest daughter ends up pregnant by this Naval Academy graduate, right? And my dad had graduated. He's in the class of 46 officially, but he graduated in the spring of 1945 because there were 5 years at the Naval Academy where they pushed people through in 3 years, and my dad was right in the middle of that. And so he had gone to Harvard for a year at postgraduate school to study. He was going to be a supply officer and to study, basically get an MBA at that time. It wasn't called an MBA then, but that's basically what he was sent to do immediately after finishing the Naval Academy, because the war was over and they were trying to figure out what are we going to do with all these ensigns, right?
Right.
And so they sent him to the Naval Academy, and so my parents got married at the little church around the corner in Boston, Massachusetts, on March 2nd, which is, let's say, January, February, 3 months later than they said.
Right.
And I came along in October. So anyway, the point is that, our ancestors, I'll just say it again. Our ancestors did two things perfectly. every one of our ancestors. They survived until they reproduced. Every ancestor in all of our lineages did that. Going back to single-celled organisms, they survived until they reproduced. And it's not ours to go back and second guess how they did that. Okay. And what they had to give up, and the sacrifices they had to make for their progeny. Obviously, it was kind of a game of chance back in the time of single-celled organisms, but gradually maternalism grew up, and mothers took care of their babies while fathers went out and got the food and that sort of thing. And sometimes by 8,000 years ago in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, we had become agrarian, and we learned how to farm and things, but all
it's
that.
Interesting you mentioned the Göbekli Tepe, or I always mess that up too.
Yeah.
But now there's some people who are saying instead of 8, it's more like 10 to 12, and rather than agrarian and agriculture, it was actually a pilgrimage temple and priests and such, that it wasn't a place they resided near or in, that they went to. So there's a whole lot of what I like about your rehabilitating the lineage idea is, if I go back to Göbekli Tepe, we still don't know. And we've made a lot of made a lot of presumptions, and we've made some conclusions, and some of them are great, and then some of them, again, grandma's roasts. We don't know. So what pieces are we using that were actually not of any relevance to them whatsoever?
Right. And Cherie asks, may I ask how Franklin Delano Roosevelt got his appointment in the Navy? And I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, Cherie, but I do know that he was not afflicted with polio until he was 29, I think. So he may have been in the Navy during World War One. I just don't know. And that's a piece of American history I don't know. Now, there's a couple of footnotes that I want to read. One of them is more than a page long, but this is important background for the 7 Sermons of the Dead, which we're going to begin. And so, first of all, footnote 80, which is where footnote, okay. So in footnote 80 reads, and the sentence is, then Philemon lifted his voice and taught them, saying, and the footnote reads, this sentence does not occur in Black Book 5. Concerning the relation of Philemon to the sermons, Jung told Aniela Jaffe that he grasped Philemon in the sermons. It was here that Philemon lost his autonomy from Jung. In other words, at this point, or around, at the time that Jung was writing this down, Jung realized that Philemon was not autonomous, that he was a part of himself. And so at about this time, 1916, 1917, Jung wrote out the 7 Sermons to the Dead, and they were responses to this demand of these dead Anabaptists who said that we've been to Jerusalem and we didn't find what we sought. And I think you can take that as a metaphor for I've been to church and I didn't find what I sought. I went to church and prayed, but nothing happened type thing. and therefore I don't believe in God. And so these Anabaptists who are in Jung's psyche, um, weren't getting what they needed from the church. And Jung, who was the son of a Swiss Reformed pastor, had lost his feeling about belief long before. He lost it when he was 5 years old or 11 years old. And so he's trying to cope with all this literature and the Bible and all this stuff. And what the heck does all this mean? Well, it's quite meaningful because it means something to us, whether we like it or not. The Bible is embedded in our psyches, and you don't have to read the Bible to have it embedded in your psyche. And we often hear in society references to like Cain and Abel or what have you. My boss 2 weeks ago said that she was Cain in her family. So that's how it comes up. And then, so you studied the Bible whether you knew it or not, whether you wanted to or not. And
I hate to pop culture it, but it's like the reason the Coca-Cola logo is so good. It's not good. It's just so ingrained, and everyone's seen it so many times that it's the marketing of just two words, remember me. And what happens is it's so prevalent. It's like Joseph Goebbels, make the lie something someone else does, repeat it and make it big and repeat it often. What happens is it's not true. It's just so present. Interesting about the question about FDR and his commission. I just looked it up. It goes right in line with the 5 ways you said people, get their commission. And it says on March 12th, 1913, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a 2-term state senator in New York, received the nomination to become Woodrow Wilson's Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Confirmed unanimously by the Senate, Roosevelt was just 31 years old, the youngest Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Previously, his 5th cousin Theodore Roosevelt had held the same post, and it was no accident another Roosevelt had been slotted into the same role. While the Secretary of the Navy, Josephus Daniels, dealt with policy and congressional matters, Franklin Roosevelt was left to deal with the business of personnel, operations, and contracting. Although he was an amateur in naval affairs, Roosevelt had the energy Daniels required to get things done. For his part, Daniels' demeanor helped Roosevelt learn valuable lessons in politics that would only serve to help his career in the years ahead. So it's interesting that he was appointed from a senator to Assistant Secretary of the Navy.
And that's interesting because one of my classmates was the youngest Secretary of the Navy, and his name was James Webb. I think he's the son of James Webb, for whom the telescope is named. And he became a U.S. senator later on. But so it's also interesting to note that Roosevelt was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and Winston Churchill, at about the same time, was First Lord of the Admiralty in Britain. And he lost that job in 1916, about the same time we're talking about, when he lost Gallipoli, and he was recalled as Secretary or First Lord of the Admiralty, and so he chose to join his regiment, and for the next 10 months. He actually served as an infantry officer in the trenches of World War I. That's Winston Churchill did. And,
oh, wow.
And so if you ever read The Last Lion, which is the first of a three-book trilogy by William Manchester of the biography of Winston Churchill, you can find that information. He's
cool.
Very interesting guy, that was for sure. But obviously Roosevelt was too. And so in 1913, he was not yet afflicted with polio.
Right.
All right. So there's a footnote here that sort of explains the context of the first Sermon of the Dead. I think it's important to read this before we actually read the first sermon. So I'll do that now. This is footnote 81. Jung's calligraphic and printed versions of the sermon bear the subheading, quote, "The Seven Instructions of the Dead, written by Basilides in Alexandria, where the East touches the West," translated from the original Greek text into the German language. Basilides was a Christian philosopher in Alexandria in the first part of the 2nd century. Little is known about his life, and only fragments of his teachings have survived, and none in his own hand, which present a cosmogonic myth. For the extant fragments and commentary, see Bentley Leighton edition, The Gnostic Scriptures, from Doubleday. According to Charles King, Basilides was by birth an Egyptian. Before his conversion to Christianity, he, quote, "followed the doctrines of Oriental Gnosis and endeavored to combine the tenets of Christian religion with the Gnostic philosophy. For this purpose, he chose expressions of his own invention and ingenious symbols. The Gnostics and Their Remains is the name of the book. According to Leighton, the classical Gnostic myth was the following structure. Act 1, the expansion of a solitary first principle, God, into a full non-physical spiritual universe. Act 2, creation of the material universe, including stars, planets, Earth, and hell. Act 3, creation of Adam, Eve, and their children. Act 4, subsequent history of the human race, the Gnostic scriptures. This in its broadest outlines, Jung's sermons is presented in the form analogous to a Gnostic myth. Jung discusses Basilides in Ion, which he wrote in 1951. The credits of the Gnostics for having found suitable symbolic expressions of the self, and notes that Basilides and Valentinus allowed themselves to be influenced in large measure by natural inner experience. They therefore provide, like the alchemist, a veritable mine of information concerning all those symbols arising out of the repercussions of the Christian message. At the same time, their ideas compensate the asymmetry of God postulated by the doctrine of privatio boni. That's God is all good, is privatio boni. Exactly like those well-known modern tendencies of the unconscious to produce symbols of totality for bridging the gap between conscious and the unconscious. In 1915, he wrote a letter to a friend from his student days, Rudolf Lichtenhahn, who had written a book, Die Offenbarung im Gnostis, something. From Lichtenhahn's deep reply, dated November 11th, it appears that Jung had asked for information concerning the conception of different human characters in Gnosticism and their possible correlation with William James's distinction between tough and tender-minded characters. In Memories, Jung said, between 1918 and 1926, I had seriously studied the Gnostics, for they too had been confronted with the primal world of the unconscious. They had dealt with its content and images.
Oh, you froze.
Symbols of the libido, which is
You froze. Your video froze right at the content and images.
Okay.
Just so the video will.
Okay. Between 1918 and 1926, I had seriously studied the Gnostics for they too had been confused by the primal world of the unconscious. Confronted with the primal world of the unconscious. They had dealt with its contents and images, which were obviously contaminated with a world of drives. Jung was already reading Gnostic literature in the course of the preparatory reading for Transformation of Symbols of the Libido, which came out in English as Psychology of the Unconscious. There has been an extensive body of commentaries concerning the seven sermons, which provides some valuable discussion. However, these should be treated cautiously, as they considered the sermons without the benefit of Liber Novus and the Black Books. Liber Novus being the red book and the Black Book. So the commentaries have to be considered cautiously. And not least, Philemon's commentaries, which together provide critical contextual clarification. Scholars have discussed Jung's relation to Gnosticism and the historical Basilides, other possible sources and parallels for the sermons, and the relation of the sermons to Jung's later works. And see Christine Maillard's Les Sept Sermons aux Morts de Carl Gustav Jung. And let's see. Okay, there's a lot of book references, so you can look at those. Okay, it's all book references.
It's all book references, and I think the one.
So go ahead.
I think it's all book references. I think the one for the audience that's probably the most first accessible would be the last reference, would be Stephen Holler's The Gnostic Jung and the Seven Sermons of the Dead. It'll be more in modern English.
Yeah.
And then you can dial into, Journal of Analytical Psychology, and you get more esoteric and jargonistic professionally from a psychological perspective. But I think Stephen Holler's The Gnostic Jung and Seven Sermons to the Dead will probably be a good place with, they're what, 15? How many book references there? We get a whole book lineage going on there. So
yeah,
I think the most modern one would be Stephen Holler's from 1982.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to read the first Sermon of the Dead straight through. In the first Sermon of the Dead, there is the concept of the pleroma. And rather simply, the pleroma is everything. Right? It's well, anyway, there's going to be some discussions of the pleroma on this YouTube channel over the next few months. But Jung is first referring to it here in the first Sermon of the Dead. So I'm going to read the first sermon. The sermons themselves are rather short, and we can talk about them. So then Philemon.
Go ahead, and as you start, I'm just going to refill. I'll be right back.
Then Philemon lifted his voice and taught them, saying, and this is the first sermon to the dead. Now here I begin with nothingness. Nothingness is the same as fullness. In infinity, full is as good as empty. Nothingness is empty and full. You might just as well say anything else about nothingness. For instance, that it is white or black or that it does not exist, or that it exists. That which is endless and eternal has no qualities, since it has all qualities. We call this nothingness or fullness the pleroma. Therein, both thinking and being cease, since the eternal and the endless possess no qualities. No one is in it, for he would then be distant from the pleroma and would possess qualities that would distinguish him as something distinct from the pleroma. In the pleroma, there is nothing and everything. It is fruitless to think about the pleroma, for this would mean self-dissolution. Creation is not in the pleroma, but in itself. The pleroma is the beginning and the end of creation. It pervades creation, just as sunlight pervades the air. Although the pleroma is altogether pervasive, creation has no share in it, just as a wholly transparent body becomes neither light nor dark through the light pervading it. We are, however, the pleroma itself, for we are part of the eternal and the endless, but we have no share therein, as we are infinitely removed from the pleroma, not spatially or temporally, but essentially, since we are distinguished from the pleroma in our essence as creation, which is confined within time and space. Yet, because we are parts of the pleroma is also in us. Even in the smallest point, the pleroma is endless, eternal, and whole, since small and great are qualities that are contained in it. It is nothingness that is whole and continuous throughout. Only figuratively, therefore, do I speak of creation as part of the pleroma, because actually the pleroma is nowhere divided, since it is nothingness. We are also the whole pleroma, because figuratively, the pleroma is the smallest point in us, merely assumed, not existing, and the boundless firmament about us. But why then do we speak of the pleroma at all, if it is everything and nothing? I speak about it in order to begin somewhere, and also to free you from the delusion that somewhere without or within there is something fixed or in some way established from the outset. Every so-called fixed and certain thing is only relative. That alone is fixed and certain, that is subject to change. Creation, however, is subject to change, therefore it alone is fixed and determined because it has qualities. Indeed, it is quality itself. And since we were talking about FDR, this is where it gets change itself. The only thing that doesn't change is change itself. Thus we ask, how did the creation come into being? Creatures came into being, but not creation. Since creation is the very quality of the pleroma, as much as non-creation, eternal death. Creation is ever present, and so is death. The pleroma has everything differentiation and non-differentiation. Differentiation is creation. It is differentiated. Differentiation is its essence, and therefore it differentiates. Therefore, man differentiates, since his essence is differentiation. Therefore, he also differentiates the qualities of the pleroma that do not exist. He differentiates them on account of his own essence. Therefore, we must speak of those qualities of the pleroma that do not exist. You say, what use is there in speaking about it at all? Did you yourself not say that it is not worth thinking about the pleroma? I mentioned to free you from from the delusion that we are able to think about the pleroma. When we distinguish the qualities of the pleroma, we are speaking from the ground of our differentiated state and about our own differentiation, but have effectively said nothing about the pleroma. Yet we need to speak about our own differentiation so that we may sufficiently differentiate ourselves. Our very nature is differentiation. If we are not true to this nature, we do not differentiate ourselves enough. We must therefore make distinctions between qualities. You ask, what harm is there in not differentiating oneself? If we do not differentiate, we move beyond our essence, beyond creation, and we fall into non-differentiation, which is the other quality of the pleroma. We fall into the pleroma itself and cease to be created beings. We lapse into dissolution in nothingness. This is the death of the creature. Therefore, we die to the same extent that we do not differentiate. Hence, the creature's essence strives toward differentiation and struggles against primeval perilous sameness. This is called the principium individuationis. This principle is the essence of the creature. From this, you can see why non-differentiation and non-distinction pose a great danger to the creature. We must therefore distinguish the qualities of the pleroma. These qualities are pairs of opposites, such as the effective and the ineffective, the fullness and the emptiness, the living and the dead, the different and the same, light and darkness, hot and cold, force and matter, time and space, good and evil, the beautiful and the ugly, the one and the many, etc. The pairs of opposites are qualities of the pleroma that do not exist because they cancel themselves out. As we are the pleroma itself, we also have all these qualities in us. Since our nature is grounded in differentiation, we have these qualities in the name and under the sign of differentiation, which means, first, these qualities are differentiated and separate in us. Therefore, they do not cancel each other out, but are effective. Thus, we are the victims of the pairs of opposites. The pleroma is rent within us. Second, these qualities belong to the pleroma, and we must possess and live them only in the name and under the sign of differentiation. We must differentiate ourselves from these qualities. They cancel each other out in the pleroma, but not in us. Distinction from them saves us. When we strive for the good or the beautiful, we forget our essence, which is differentiation, and we fall subject to the spell of the qualities of the pleroma, which are the pairs of opposites. We endeavor to attain the good and the beautiful, yet at the same time we also seize the evil and the ugly, since in the pleroma these are one with the good and the beautiful. But if we remain true to our essence, which is differentiation, we differentiate ourselves from the good and the beautiful, and hence from the evil and the ugly. And thus we do not fall under the spell of the pleroma, namely into nothingness and dissolution. Your object, you said that difference and sameness are also qualities of the pleroma. What is it like if we strive for distinctiveness? Are we in so doing not true to our own nature? And must we nonetheless fall into sameness when we strive for distinctiveness? You must not forget that the pleroma has no qualities. We create these through thinking. If therefore you strive for distinctiveness or sameness or are any qualities whatsoever, you pursue thoughts that flow to you out of the pleroma. Thoughts, namely concerning the non-existent qualities of the pleroma. Inasmuch as you run after these thoughts, you fall again into the pleroma and attain distinctiveness and sameness at the same time. Not your thinking, but your essence is differentiation. Therefore, you must not strive for what you conceive as distinctiveness, but for your own essence. At bottom, therefore, there is only one striving, namely the striving for one's own essence. If you had this striving, you would not need to know anything about the pleroma and its qualities, and yet you would attain the right goal by virtue of your essence. Since, however, thought alienates us from our essence, I must teach you that knowledge with which you can bridle your thoughts. The dead faded away grumbling and moaning, and their cries died out away in the distance. But I turned to Philemon and said, "My father, you utter strange teachings. Did not the ancients teach similar things? And was it not a reprehensible heresy, removed equally from love and the truth? And why do you lay out such a teaching to this horde, which the night wind swirled up from the dark blood fields of the west?" My son, Philippon, replied, "These dead ended their lives too early. These were seekers and therefore still hover over their graves. Their lives were incomplete since they knew no way beyond the one to which belief had abandoned them. But since no one teaches them, I must do so. That is what love demands, since they wanted to hear, even if they grumble. But why do I impart this teaching of the ancients? I teach in this way because their Christian faith once discarded and persecuted precisely this teaching, but they repudiated Christian belief and hence were rejected by that faith. They do not know this, and therefore I must teach them so that their life may be fulfilled and they can enter into death. But do you, O wise Philemon, believe what you teach? My son Philemon replied, "Why do you raise this question? How could I teach what I believe? Who would give me the right to such a belief? It is what I know how to say, not because I believe it, but because I know it. If I knew better, I would teach better, but it would be easy for me to believe more. Yet should I teach a belief to those who have discarded belief? And I ask you, is it good to believe something more if one does not know better?" But I retorted, "Are you certain that things really are as you say?" To this Philemon answered, "I do not know whether it is the best that one can know, but I know nothing better, and therefore I am certain that these things are as I say. If they were otherwise, I would say something else, since I would know them to be otherwise. But these things are as I know them, since my knowledge is precisely these things themselves." My father, is that your guarantee that you are not mistaken? "There are no mistakes in these things," Philemon replied. "There are only different levels of knowledge. These things are as you know them. Only in your world are things always other than you know them, and therefore there are only mistakes in your world." After these words, Philemon bent down and touched the earth with his hand and disappeared. Okay, so that's the end of the first sermon to the dead. Whew.
Yeah, I think that the last, after these words, Philemon bent down and touched the earth with his hands and disappeared.
Right.
And that to me is maybe it's implication or metaphor, but it's to me a direct nod to there's nothing wrong with you. Rehabilitate the grandfathers. There's nothing wrong with you. No need to play the victim. Live your life and turn away from the past and touch the earth and inhabit your life. And I think there's a metaphor there with his hands and disappeared so actively.
Yeah.
Non-idle hands. When he touched the earth, he became fully connected to his nature. And in that sense, you are always complete. You are never finished, lifelong. And I think this is the first sermon is a great nod to basically get up and get on with it, because it's not going to come to you sitting on the couch. Hope can be a narcotic. And the reality is hope can also be an eternal ember. And so I'd say pick the eternal ember and not the hope that's narcotic, because you're connected. I mean, you are of the earth. And the whole thing here, when he starts, reminds me of the Atman. The larger the pleroma, the larger than large, the smaller than small, which is everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey,
Go ahead.
I wanted to share. I don't remember which Native American tribe it was, but there's a Native American belief that I forgot what his Maho, I think it was Maho. He created all living beings out of mud. So he sees absolutely nothing but water. And so he reaches his hands down into the depths of the waters, and out he pulls out the mud. And then with the mud, he forms hills and land. And then he creates birds and fish. And the birds start complaining. They don't want to just swim around. So then he gives them wings and they fly. It's a very beautiful story about Native American religion. And so this Maho, Mahoe, Maho created everything by simply taking his hands and dipping them into the depths of the unknown and forming together what we consider the Americas. It's a very beautiful story.
Well, that is a beautiful story, because it also aligns with the sacred clay created Lilith and Adam first. Eve created from the rib, but Lilith was created from the same sacred clay, that mud. And then the myths of Oshun, the feminine oceanic piece, and then Poseidon, which is the sand and the dirt and the mud vessel underneath the ocean. So you get the generative Oshun and the formative Poseidon, and both of them exist in Maho, because in the ocean reaches down for something not there or unseen or unknown, and then basically reaches to the bottom of the ocean and pulls the mud up so that he can birth the world. Yeah, that is a beautiful story.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that it's a one single character that's doing both. So the Odin is also Freya kind of piece, but Maho is a uniquely complete being instead of having a counterpart. So there's an original creator there.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to stop at that point on the sermons, but I thought I'd give everybody an update on my research into my psyche in the form of my paintings. So I remember I am painting from the unconscious, and I'm doing two pieces simultaneously. One is a very large piece that I can only work on Saturdays and Sundays, and the other is a smaller piece which I work on during the week for the first hour after I wake up every morning. And I'm calling these things Vision of America. And so I want to share with you where I am. Where did it go now? What did it? Boy. All right. So this is where I am on the bigger piece. And so keeping in mind that the doodle is entirely mine, you could not copy it, but you have your own, and therefore you should um, go listen to Colleen Kiber's talk that she did the other day on February 17th with us. In fact, today is the official launch of her new book, is today. But I followed her precisely in doing my own doodle and then coloring it. And then the next step will be to outline some of the color boundaries, which would be a rocky kind of process. Now, for some reason, our friends at Apple have decided that we don't know where we want to put our pictures, so they decide for us, which I don't particularly appreciate because they put them in places that I don't want them. Okay,
well, it's funny that this morning I was just running late, and then as I'm running late, I open up my iPad and it says SIM failure. And I'm like, what do you do with that? So I and so I'm sitting there on my phone, it's like, oh, well, get the paper clip and you stick it in the little tiny hole and you open. Well, I couldn't get the drawer to open. So I shook it and I banged it lightly on the table and then it started. So I guess the Fonzie got me started this morning.
Okay. So the second piece is two-thirds complete. So I've done the doodle and I've completely colored it, but I have not done the rocky piece yet. And I'm going to give it to my daughter for her birthday, which was a few days ago. It was on Washington's birthday. She was born on Washington's birthday. And so this is one of these pieces, and this is Vision of America, number 1, study number 4. This was the 4th study that I did. And you don't see all the faces in this yet, but there are a lot of faces in this. And you see at the center, Orange Man. This is my signature, basically, in these pieces. Orange Man has emerged from these pieces, and so therefore I've accepted it as my signature. And so here you can see he's got kind of a hook nose, and he's sort of got his mouth wide open in kind of shock, and he's looking off into the future. And so Orange Man is looking into the future with shock, and this yellow man, depending on how you want to see him, you could see him in multiple ways, but he's also looking into the future. So it occurred to me that this could be our former president looking into the future. And it could be a giant shout with his mouth open this way, or it can be just this little guy with a nose and a big chin, kind of. And if you turn it over, there's another guy that I discovered when I was working with it upside down. And he is right here. He's Green Man. So in this way, if I look at him this way, here's Orange Man again, but now he's looking like kind of a skeleton with his mouth open, sort of in shock. But there's Green Man, and Green Man is right here. There's his nostril, and there's his eye, and there's his mouth. And these things just emerge. You can see somebody else with a big shock look. And so keeping in mind Colleen's dictum about what these things variously mean. The left side of the painting is the past, and the right side is the future. And the lower left is the creative wellspring. So you can see there's a lot of heat coming up out of the creative wellspring. And the upper left is dreams and visions. So it uses a lot of dark colors. And if you pay attention to this, I've not yet done the rocky embellishment of this. So every place there's a color boundary, like between this lighter orange and this darker orange, there'll be a line in there. And I have a big job ahead of me to put in all the rocky elements of this painting. But once I do, I predict that there will be very many faces in it. But here you see an elephant kind of crying green with its trunk up this way. You can take it for what it's worth. And so the right side is the future, and the upper right is is hope, and it's the mission, our mission, if we have one. And the lower right is wisdom, represented by the purple, and the tools that you have to achieve the mission. And so here you see me apparently pressing up into the future and pressing on the mission. But that's my vision of America, study number 4. It's not complete yet, but you get the idea of what I'm doing with these. So this is the bigger piece that it again has the same quadrants in it. And let's see, I think I'll share a couple pictures taken out of our balcony last night. These are kind of cool. This is the moon, and it was pitch dark, but this is what our cell phones pick up. It's really quite interesting. There's a swimming pool right there, and that's what is in the dark. But we took those pictures last night. And then this from the Jung Society of Washington today. The more the creation is significant, the less you are capable of reducing it to the personal psychology. Freud tried it, for instance, tried to reduce a very perfect work of art to the very imperfect personal psychology of the artist, but nothing comes out of the destruction of a work of art. And so you can like or dislike my work of art, but it really doesn't matter. You can burn it and so on, but nothing comes out of destroying it. I will be the same, and that does represent what my psyche sees as a vision of America at this point in time. You don't have to agree with me. It's not your vision, it's my vision of America. So that's a fair enough point. Any comments? Richard says, I see many dragons in their wisdom. Thank you.
That quote is really wonderful between Freud and Jung, because Jung is including the space between the darkness, the unknown, and that space between contextualizes identities by contrast. And to me, it's also where the verbs live. And though the darkness may not seem to change, when you change your verbs, the tenor of that space between changes and you manifest things differently.
Yeah. So I think that there's some interest. I've already framed one of these. It was study number 1 that I did. And that study I've given to my grandson for his 18th birthday. Let me see if I can find the one, if I know which one it is. It's always a big question. It's not that one, I don't think. Maybe it is. I don't know. It's not. It's this one. Okay, so this was my study number 1, and this was actually the piece I was working on that gave me the idea of the vision of America. So this is the Vision of America study number 1, Vision of America number 1, study number 1, and this piece I framed and am giving to my grandson for his birthday today. His 18th birthday is today. And I hope to hear from him that he likes it. We'll see. It's always a bit iffy. But anyway, there are a bunch of faces in here. Here you can see the rocky texture that I've put in more. I hadn't really established the idea of really painting out the rocky as much when I did this study. Okay, so this is Skip developing a style, and so I was just working on the principle of doing a doodle and coloring it, and then I was throwing a little rocky on, but I hadn't fully rockied this, and so now I'm going to be more detailed in what I'm doing in the future. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I think I'm really enjoying the process of how it's honestly changing while it's staying the same, and it's both.
Yeah, it is changing. And by the way, I am learning something about watercolor that you might like to know. Winsor & Newton is a company that's been making watercolors since 1842, and they know a lot about making watercolors. And so I recently bought a set of Winsor & Newton Cotman colors, and actually I might have a picture of that. And this is so that just so if you decide to take up some of this activity, like I'm doing here, here's the colors, and I'm going to share this with you if I can find my share button. Okay, so if you take up watercolors as I have done, Well, that didn't work. I'm not gonna share that. Okay, wait a minute. Oh, I see what's happened here. Okay, now maybe it'll work. Nope, that is, I'm looking at I can't look at the video on YouTube and see what I want to see. Okay, here we go. All right, so recently, as I've been researching this and trying to decide what materials would be the best, I bought this set of 45 Cotman colors. Now, this is available from I think Amazon and Dick Blick for about $55. It has 45 colors in it. It does not have bronze, copper, bronze, silver, and moon glow, which are colors that I have purchased separately. But these are the colors in the 45 color set. Now, these are so-called Cotman colors. I don't know why they're called Cotman colors, but apparently there was some guy named Cotman. and Winsor Newton calls these colors Cotman. But from Winsor Newton's point of view, these are a step below professional watercolors. Still, they're quite good. I like them very much. And it's a good variety. I was using those Chinese colors, and I had 100 colors in that palette, but I don't trust the longevity of those colors. But the Winsor Newton people have assured me that they know what they're doing, and these have great longevity. And I don't know if I've lost my, okay. But this lower set, I did buy 10, or no, 8, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I bought 8 other colors of Winsor & Newton that I did buy the professional. And and then I bought one from somebody called Daniel Smith, which is called Moonglow. That's this one here. But I wanted to have a better diversity in my greens and in my purples. And so that's why I bought these professional ones. You can't always tell when they're in the pan what color they will be. For example, this color is called intense green, but it looks black in the picture. But when you look at it, when it's painted out, it's this one up here in the middle. And it's
your Cotman piece. I think the history behind your Cotman piece is John Sell Cotman, Sellcotman, was 1782 to 1842, was an English marine and landscape painter, etcher, illustrator, and a leading member of the Norwich School of Painters.
Uh-huh.
So
okay.
he, son of a silk merchant and lace dealer, he went into art instead of the family business.
Uh-huh. So that set is named after him, presumably in some way.
I think so. I'm not sure, but that feels right.
That's probably true. So, but what I can say is that the Cotman colors feel sumptuous as compared to using the Chinese colors, the cheap Chinese colors that I bought, because I think I got that 100 color set for like $10 or something like that. And when I got the professional colors, wow, they really feel sumptuous and smooth to put on the paper as compared to the Cotman. So speaking for myself, I'm gradually going to evolve into all professional colors, but I'm going to go ahead and use the Cotman because they're also quite good. But if you need a more diverse palette, Winsor Newton has 109 colors, I believe. So, and they're not cheap. Just one color is like $10. So it's going to be a process to collect them. But anyway, so thank everybody for being here. And I hope that this has been a useful discussion of my artistic discoveries. I'm doing my best. I'm mainly doing this as a meditation technique for myself. And so far, I'm happy with the idea of framing these and giving them as birthday presents to my family this year. So there's no idea that I'm going to suddenly become a great artist and very famous. And I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the connection with my unconscious, which I'm definitely feeling. And and I don't see any need to do anything more than just for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that my family will enjoy these. I hope so. But if they don't, tough.
Well, I didn't think about this till just now, but I think it was, I don't know if it was Jung. I don't know. Actually, I don't know the origin of I can't say quote because I'm probably not even paraphrasing, but the notion of once you get a handle on the inner workings of your psyche, stop looking at the mechanics of it and instead turn outward and just make things of beauty. So, the thing is, I think we talk about this every week and all that, but what are we doing with it? And, your doodles that's doing, honestly, me doing work with my tarot profession, it's working with images to stimulate other people's psyches. So in a sense, watercoloring for them to paint their own lives. And
sure.
But I think that, we can get almost too hung up on this works this way and this works that way. Whereas in this first sermon, it doesn't matter the way it works, because ask me again tomorrow, it's gonna change.
Right. That's the point. And
you can change your mind. I mean,
and the amazing thing to me is that these things do present faces. And my theory is that by evolution, our ancestors thankfully developed a skill for seeing eyes or a face in the darkness of the jungles from whence we came. And so it was a survival technique. And so our psyche, we see eyes when there aren't any sometimes. Or you might be at a crowd and all of a sudden you feel something and you look around and there's somebody staring at the back of your neck or something like that.
Well, that, and I think also one of the arts of seeing at night. I mean, during the day we see by contrast and we see objects, and at night it's actually seeing the nothingness in the darkness, because what happens is things that are alive absorb light. And so instead of looking for the thing, you look for even the darker. And so even though Arthurian enter the forest at the darkest point, at night, to see and not trip over stuff, it's easier to see if you look for what's not there even more, because what is there will be not alive and in your way or a danger.
Right. And what I'm finding is that these paintings are alive. You cannot look at them twice, okay?
Right.
In the same way. They just change. And as Sherry says at the end of the chat here, do art not for making money and power. It lives inside of us all. And so absolutely. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Jordan. See you next week. Thank you, Amela. Did you have anything more you wanted to say? Amela?
Yes, the tribe is Cherokee. It's the
Oh,
Cherokee
Cherokee
tribe.
tribe. Yes, that's
Okay.
where it's from.
It's interesting though that you bring that up, because actually, if here's a little tidbit of history. Some Jews who escaped Europe in World War II, right, came here and were absorbed into the Cherokee tribes because the skull face and especially the nose structure has a similar shape. The drop, like a bent roof, you get that shape of a nose. The Cherokees have that. And what was wild is then when the Jews just grew their hair and got a tan, no one could find them because they thought they were just Indians. They were Cherokee. So they basically found a similar culture across the world and were able to escape into basically live in nature and such with the Cherokee. But so the Cherokee, that's just a little tidbit of history where that was one of the places to basically come and live freely with another culture. So that's something
That's
fun to look up.
interesting. When
Yeah.
when that was here in the Americas?
Yeah, the World War II, Jews who escaped Nazi Germany, some of them came to America and then discovered that the Indians, if you remove color, tan versus white, etc., the facial structure was so similar
Oh, right.
that they were able, if they just grew their hair long and got a tan, they looked Cherokee and instead of Jewish. And it's interesting because then they could escape and no one could find them, and then they were free.
Huh.
So that's
Yeah.
that's an interesting little
speaking
sidebar.
of speaking of history, I'm not sure how historically accurate all Disney movies are, but but I know
Yes.
that they really try with the Eastern European folklore and the Brothers Grimm. But something that I really appreciate was the movie Mulan, which I love till this day. Excuse me, can you turn that off? Sorry about that. So, in Mulan, this young woman named Mulan, she realized that there was going to be a war because something happened, the Huns instigated, and so now she goes over to her ancestors' burial temple, and it's so amazing to me because she goes there and she starts praying to these sculptures, and there's ashes of her relatives there, and so her relatives are still asleep. So I'm not sure if like by the time it's like a 7-day shipping, 7-day standard for her ancestors to finally appear. But what does appear were the animals, the symbols of like the astronomical symbols and the family heirloin, and it's so beautiful. But thinking about that, I also thought about my son and I. We went to the city of brotherly love, and he said to me, "Mommy, what if Thomas Jefferson, I think it was actually Benjamin Franklin. Mommy, what if Benjamin Franklin wakes up and he pokes me?" Because there's a sculpture of, I'm not sure who that is. The president, is it Jackson or Anderson and Benjamin Franklin? They're like shaking hands in front of the Masonic Lodge in Pennsylvania. So my son is standing in the middle of them, and then he stands closer to Benjamin Franklin, and he says, "Mommy, what if he pokes me?" I'm like, "Stop animating everything."
Oh, funny.
Sorry, folks. Some things just can't wait. So
Yeah. I'm gonna thank you.
thank you all. Take care.
Thank
And
you.
Cherie says
Right.
that her grandpa was more than half full-blooded, half Cherokee. So anyway,
Oh, wow.
interesting fact.
Yeah.
And so I am going to call an end to this. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next
Thank you.
week.